Welcome to the gripping conclusion of the Roman Army 2021 UofW lecture on logistics and campaigns. And here, some sort of planning and action. Using Hunt's Pridianum as a sample case study and some comments in Vegetius. Okay, so we looked at information and specifically geographical and ethnographic in the previous video. Okay, so you do the stuff, you get food, then the regular and going to war or whatever. And when you prepare, you need to know about the place you're going to and people. But you can see they had limitations, but they still did well. So here we do have some other sources that provide some hints at this. If you look at Campbell 183, or it is this thing called Hunt's Pridianum 105-106, which is this sort of report of what sorts of things soldiers might be involved in as they're preparing for war. So this comes in the context of Trajan's Second Dacian War. It's dated the 16th of September, again, 105-106. Deals specifically with this first cohort of Spaniards, veterana, at Stobi, and it includes all sorts of information, both from the supply and the planning stage. So we know that there were 546 soldiers, including six centurions, 4 decurions, cavalry. Talks a bit about their pay, but it also includes things like those soldiers who are missing. And we saw one of these have been to Landus. Some of them have been given to the fleet. Some of them with the legates, or hinting at the governor's stuff. Some have been sent back. Some have been sent back to this Herennius Saturninus. At least one had been transferred to the army in Bononia. But then also you can see some sort of day-to-day issues. We don't necessarily have numbers. I don't have them here, at least on the slide. At least some died by drowning, so sort of accidental deaths. Some killed by bandits. Some killed in battle. Total number lost. Some restored, more on pay, etc. And then we also see some sort of doing things in and around the province, sort of preparing and doing things that, as necessary. More off, doing things to the legate, some working for the emperor, some involved in the garrison somewhere else, Pira Bordava, some in the detachment. Some had been sent across the Danube on an expedition, okay, and then we also have some responsible for protecting the corn supply. Some are at grain ships, waiting for supplies to come, and some are with the clerks. This could also be to do with preparing and going to war. There'll be a lot of probably a reasonable amount of paperwork as reinforcements were brought in, new men were brought in. You had to go and check out who they were and send them off where they needed to be, but also monitor the supplies, etc. So big undertaking. And then we also have some obviously involved in the procurement of animals, to the Hymus Mountains, sort of in Bulgaria way. We have some who are on other duties, guard duty, and some who are sick, and so on. So you can see that in the day-to-day they would be involved in lots of things, and even you can see lots of components involved in war. Not all the men would be together, and some would be getting supplies, and some would be might have perished through just a variety of things. It's a very important sort of document. Now, Vegetius is our military manual guy. He's a super important source for issues. He's writing about an earlier legion. It's prescriptive. This is what you should do, reigning emperor. This is Aemilianus. The previous one was, again, between Polion and Pulo. So, as a military manual, again, it has lots of advice, but it gives some hint at some of the things you need to do when you're preparing for war, aimed at an emperor, but you could say for a general. It's hard to know if anyone would be reading things like this as they're preparing, and there are debates about this. I think probably a lot of these might be just as likely to be read by just a civilian elite audience who just wanted to read stuff about military things. Military topics could be popular. Histories were about military topics, some poetry, etc. It was a facet of daily life. A lot of people thought about it. Now, Vegetius gets all these hints of things, to prepare for, in and around war, from the proper size of the army, and I'm looking down at it right now, to, how much attention should be paid to getting food, 3.3. The order of subjects demands that I speak next about the provisioning system for fodder and grain. For armies are more often destroyed. This is a famous phrase. For armies are more often destroyed by starvation than battle, and hunger is more savage than the sword. Secondly, other misfortunes can in time be alleviated. Fodder and grain supply have no remedy in a crisis except storage in advance. So prepare for food, etc. And then other sort of preparation, supply, and logistics things. He talks about more about campaigns and firewood. You haven't talked about fuel for things and slings and equipment. We've talked a bit about that. He talks about signals, which gives you a hint of the importance of communications and everything. He talks about caution when you're in the area of the enemy because you never know. He hints at some of the things that the trouble I was explaining to do with geography and ethnography. He says, those who have made a careful study of the art of war assert that more dangers tend to arise on the march than battle itself. For in battle, everyone is armed, and they see the enemy at close quarters and come mentally prepared for fighting. On the march, the soldier is less armed and less alert. He is thrown into constant confusion by a sudden attack or concealed ambush. Think of Varus's disaster, the Teutoburg Forest. Therefore, the general should take steps with all caution and prudence to ensure that the army suffer no attack on the march or may easily repel a raid without loss. Okay. When he gets into geographical things, he should have itineraries of all regions in which war is being waged, written out in the fullest detail so that they may learn the distances between places in terms of the number of miles and the quality of roads, and examine shortcuts, byways, mountains, rivers accurately described. So there's more of that kind of stuff that we talked about in the previous video. Then he gets into other things too, and then we can go further along, and there's little passages there. What and how many things are to be considered when judging whether to engage the enemy in raids and ambushes or else in pitched battle. Okay. Specific things for this, and then some, other things like what to do if you have people who aren't used to fighting. Obviously, we've talked about the training process, but there's a lot involved, and sometimes you had newer recruits, and there's not much you can do. And then even like getting into, how to choose a suitable place. So lots involved in that front. That's where we'll stop the planning thing, just to take stock of all this. So we can ignore number 2, but we've seen their logistics system. We talked a bit about food as an example. One of the things supply. We looked at Vindolanda to give you some idea of local circumstances. We talked about planning for war in terms of the information they had and so on, and looked at Hans Pridianum and Vegetius providing some evidence for some of this stuff. That's it. I'm going to drink coffee now.